Hello and welcome to another video. Today you join me somewhere in Huddersfield. I'm doing my Mod 2 training with Brighouse Motorcycle Training, who are confusingly based in Huddersfield, and I know I keep referring to them as being in Brighouse, but they're not. I assume presumably at one point in time they were, but they are firmly based in Huddersfield now at DC Motorcycles. So I am with another student who's the one on the motorcycle just in front of me there, and ahead of him is the instructor who's currently taking the lead. We're making our way towards Wakefield to the DVSA training centre there, because he wants to show us some of the sort of test routes in that area, because I think Wakefield is kind of the main training centre they tend to take their students to. I did my first Mod 1 in Wakefield. I have spoken about this previously, but to recap, it's difficult to get there on public transport. It's quite a long drive for me. If I did want to go there on Luna, probably on the order of at least an hour and a half or more, and it's through lots of busy and unfamiliar roads. So I took public transport last time, which was a nuisance because it involved taxis and trains and what have you. And then I had a rather bad experience at the training centre. As I said previously, the instructor that I had, it was just he was a bit robotic, and he wasn't very friendly, and he was quite soft-spoken, so I found him hard to hear in my helmet. And the experience I had at Steeton, where I took my Mod 1 again and actually passed it, was like night and day different. The guy was so much more personable, so much more friendly. He put me at ease, and it just made the whole experience so much nicer. So I fully intend to do my Mod 2 at Steeton, but unfortunately it wasn't an option to drive off to Steeton and do any of the test routes around there. But that's fine, because I've driven through Keighley now many times, and in that sort of area, so I've got a reasonable idea of what to expect up there. But anyway, it's all good practice, so join me along on the ride. I'm on the Kymco scooter again, which I will give you the full specs of shortly, and probably a bit of a review now, because I've spent quite a few hours on this maxi-scooter, so I can compare it to Luna and my Honda PCX that I had before that. So, enjoy the ride. As you might notice, every time the dashboard comes into the video frame, it's very much all lit up for Christmas. It flickers and flashes and strobes for all sorts of different colours. Unfortunately, this just seems to be a limitation of the technology that they're using for the dashboard. It just doesn't sync up with any of the frame rates that the GoPro wants to use, and hence you kind of get that kind of flickering, which is not great. It's not a very nice dashboard. I'll talk about that, I guess, in a little bit. But yeah, even when the bike is just running to the naked eye, you can kind of see like a little gentle kind of strobing to it. Like nothing as extreme as you see on video, but yeah, it just looks very dated, the technology that they're using. But for the good news is it's largely going to be off of frame. It's partly due to how I'm sitting, and also just because I've had to correct the video footage slightly. As it is, it's still slightly on a bit of an angle, but it seems like when I just put the GoPro back on after I've fitted up the sort of one-way microphone and radio that they put on you so you can hear the instructions, I must have just set the GoPro slightly askew. So although I am correcting it as much as I can, without sort of overly cropping the video, it does have the benefit that you don't have flashing colours at the bottom of the screen constantly. So you can see me here trying to further adjust the mirrors. So when we first left the DC motorcycles, they gave us a chance to stop at the side of the road and just tweak the mirrors and what have you to our liking. And I adjusted them as much as I could. But I've got relatively broad shoulders, and the mirrors just don't stick out that far as it is. So really all I can see in my mirrors, unless I kind of really move my arm out of the way, is my shoulders in the mirrors, which is not ideal. The way I have them set up on Luna, I can glance in them and see behind me, which is what you want from a mirror, right? You don't want to have to be sort of contorting your body to be able to get a view behind you, because it's such a sort of important thing for safety. So I'm going to have to try and get them to modify that for me somehow, I think, before I actually go on to do the full A2 test. Now, I didn't actually spot the other student doing this at the time, but he does stop in a keep clear box up here on the junction, which I think is just there to sort of facilitate like a private driveway rather than like another junction. But the instructor pointed out, little mistakes like that can easily rack up minors, so it's something to be mindful of. Okay, so you now join us a little bit further into the right. As you can see, I'm now leading us. So the other student led us first, and now it's switched over to me. So I think this is probably a good a time as any to talk a little bit about the bike that I'm on today. So I'm riding a Kymco DTX 320, which is part of their DTX 360 lineup of sort of crossover maxi scooters. So they've got a 125 and this 320 that I'm on. This is the scooter that I did my Mod 1 training and test on. So I've spent quite a few hours on this thing at this point, including all the sort of Mod 1 training that I've done previously. And I've also spent, I think, now about 3 hours in total on this bike, just out on the public roads as well, at various and sundry speeds, and everything from sort of dual carriageway to like 20 zones. So I've got a bit of a feel for how it handles. So I'm going to give you a bit of a rundown of the specifications, because I feel like this is not one of the better known maxi scooters. Certainly in the UK, everything's always about the Honda ADV 350, the Forzas, the Suzuki Bergman, and the Yamaha X Maxes, and the Kymco ones are a little bit by the by. So first off, this is a 320cc liquid cooled maxi scooter, which puts it in the same ballpark as the Forza 350 and ADV 350, which both come in at about 330cc. And it's about 20cc more than the Yamaha X-Max, which is a 300. It produces 30 newton meters of torque and has a peak power output of 21 kilowatts, which is around 28 horsepower. It's a little bit heavier than the competition, however, with a wet weight of around 205 kilos. The ADV 350, by comparison, has a wet weight of 186 kilos. The seat height is 800 millimeters, which is very much at my limit as someone who's quite short, with a 29-inch inside seam, but I'm happy enough to sort of support myself on one leg at a stop, so it's not a huge problem. But I think I would definitely prefer a scooter with a lower seat height than this, ideally. So the fuel tank is 12.5 litres, which I think is fairly typical for this sort of class. Maybe that's a little bit more than the competition from Honda, which I think are in like sort of 11.5 sort of range. I couldn't see the miles per gallon figures for it, but I'm sure maybe if you Google you can find those. I would imagine it's largely comparable to the other sort of bikes in its class, however. In terms of braking, it has got ABS front and rear. There's a single 280mm disc on the front and a single 260 on the back. It also has traction control, and that is all fitted as standard. The UK price is £4,800 at the time of making this video, making it one of the cheapest A2 class maxi scooters on the market. In terms of extra goodies, there isn't really much to speak of. There's a good amount of under-seat storage, as you'd expect on a maxi scooter. I couldn't find any figures for exactly how many litres it was, but I would say it looks like it's probably around the 40 mark. In terms of connectivity, there is a single USB port which is kind of hidden under a flap in the middle of the handlebars, which is a bit of an interesting choice. Because they're fully covered handlebars, there's no easy place to sort of mount a smartphone or a CarPlay sort of screen, so you're looking at sort of attaching to the brake reservoirs or otherwise having to sort of modify the bike a bit if you want to attach anything to it to actually power with that port. Then, as I've touched on previously, the dashboard on this scooter does leave quite a lot to be desired. So it's not a traditional LCD and it's not a TFT. It's kind of a white on black kind of LED illuminated screen. But because of the way it seems like it lights up those digits, it kind of relies on this sort of persistence of vision effect, which you can kind of see in slow-mo, because it goes out of sync with the frame rate on the camera, and it's sort of lighting up each individual segment of all of the numbers sort of one by one. I don't really know why they've gone with that approach, but it does result in a slightly flickery screen, and you can just see like a little gentle kind of strobing to the naked eye if you're sensitive to that kind of thing. And obviously on camera it just looks terrible. So if you plan to be a bit of a moto vlogger, I guess like I am, it seems, then I think that this is probably not going to be a very good choice, because I don't think there's going to be any way of making the dashboard not just look like party lights. So in terms of handling, obviously it's quite a heavy bike, as I've said. It does feel very planted. It feels very confident in corners. So all of that is positive. What lets it down though is the rear suspension is horrendous. I don't know how it's set up. I think there's like 6 levels of adjustment, and I don't know what it's on. I assume it's on quite a soft setting. Generally on the front suspension's pretty good at absorbing bumps. So if you hit like a bit of a pothole, you feel it, but it's not too bad. But what really upsets it is if you just go over, say, some broken up tarmac where the surface has become quite rough, the back end can really kind of pogo up and down, and it makes the whole bike properly kind of judder, which feels very uncomfortable, and it's not something I've ever experienced on any other scooter that I've ridden. So I don't know if that can be adjusted. Maybe it just needs a little bit more preload, just take some of that excess springiness out. But it's definitely something I would maybe want to test ride and just make sure that you feel comfortable with that. And I think, obviously, a lot of these kind of adventure scooters, although they have lots of great marketing shots of being driven on, you know, forest roads and stuff like this, where there's gravel tracks. I'm not quite sure that's something that you'd actually want to do on this. The brakes, I would say, are just adequate. I was using the back brake quite a lot to control my speed on the Mod 1, and for that was fine. But I find on the road it feels a little bit mushy and soft, and I get a lot more stopping power on Luna, say, when I'm using the back brake. The front brake is fine, it's quite strong, but it's also can be a little bit grabby, and if you are a little bit harsh with it, it will make the front of the scooter dive down, so that is something you need to be quite gentle with. In terms of fit and finish, there's nothing much to complain about, really. It all feels pretty solid. Certainly those mirror stems are rock solid, because I just couldn't, after that initial adjustment, I just couldn't get them to budge again. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there, if something's been over tightened or not. But certainly all the plastics and paneling are all look pretty solid. There's no squeaks, there's no sort of obvious flexing or anything like that. It all feels pretty good quality. The switchgear is pretty decent. I don't hugely like the indicators on it. I love that they make an audible click when you engage them, but there's not that much feedback from the actual switch, especially on cancelling. And I can imagine that wearing my winter gloves, I'd be constantly glancing down at the dash to make sure I have actually cancelled them, because unlike on, say, Luna, where there's a nice physical clunk that you really feel as the button presses in, it's much more subtle on this one. So maybe just something else just to be aware of. So yeah, hopefully that was useful. If the Kymco wasn't previously on your radar, or perhaps if it was and you haven't been able to find any sort of reviews of it, those are at least my sort of 2 cents. I'm sure it can probably be tuned a little bit better to make it a bit more comfortable in terms of adjusting suspension, maybe tweaking the feel of the brakes perhaps is possible on the back, I don't know. But yeah, so we're just about to pull up alongside the DVSA test centre in Wakefield. So in a moment, going to get a view through the fence to where I did my first unsuccessful attempt at my Mod 1. It doesn't bring back any happy memories. Yeah, hopefully this is the last time I'll ever come to this place. So I thought I'd finally just wrap up with my experience of the Mod 2 training and sort of what I kind of learned from the whole experience, really. Certainly when I renewed my CBT, after the road ride, the guy said I could probably just go straight to doing my Mod 2 without any further training, but it's a lot of money to do the full test of the bike hire. So I thought it would be prudent to do at least one bit of training, and I definitely learned some stuff on it. So right before we even started, he sort of went over sort of show me, tell me kind of questions and gave us like a sort of nice printout of all the kind of questions they can ask you and the sort of answers to those. So something to sort of memorize for anything that's maybe not immediately obvious. Although I think for the most part, if you've at least glanced at the owner's manual on a motorcycle, then you probably know how to check the oil level and where the horn is and things like that. But it never hurts, right? And obviously under a stressful situation, it's easy for your mind to go blank. So it's good to probably just have that stuff on paper, just so you can just, keep rereading it until it's properly sunk in and you can just recall it without any sort of problem, even under pressure. So in terms of sort of roadcraft and things, certainly what let me down, or what he pointed out a few times on me, was just positioning. Like sometimes I wasn't always in the best position on corners, or say exiting junctions. So just to make sure that I'm not in a position where I'm going to be impeding other traffic, because obviously you can get minors and things for that if you're potentially, say, blocking another vehicle from pulling past you at a junction that would say wants to turn left when you're right if you're not properly in position 3. And I just had a tendency to be sort of somewhere between position 2 and 3 sometimes when I was, like, say, taking a right hand turn. Something he dinged both of us for a little bit was just observations, but not so much observations in terms of like mirrors or shoulder checks. That wasn't a problem. It was more about we were occasionally like missing signs, like on speed transitions, say going into sort of a national speed limit, if there was like a junction or something that was kind of stealing a lot of our attention, it was quite easy to miss those signs, especially if they weren't then also repeated, say, in paint on the road. So it's just a reminder to just try and be that extra little bit more observant just when looking at road signs and things. Because like at one point, after we'd stopped, he said, what was the last speed sign you saw? And I sort of knew we were in a 30 because there were no repeaters that I'd seen, and there were street lights and there were houses, so I was pretty confident it was a 30. But I honestly couldn't remember the last time I'd actually seen a speed limit with 30 on it, which makes you think, doesn't it, like how much you see stuff and it just kind of just goes in, I would say, in one ear and out the other, but obviously it's not something you're hearing, but I don't know if there's an equivalent sort of phrase for saying stuff. But it's quite easy, I guess, to acknowledge something and then just sort of dismiss it and forget about it, which is not ideal. So I think a good sort of thing to do is, obviously, with the OSM PSL, the observation, signal, maneuver, position, speed, look, is any sort of change of speed, you should be at a minimum sort of checking your mirrors, right? So just making sure you go through that process of, there's a 30, I'll just do a quick mirror check if I'm slowing down or speeding up or what have you. Just maybe that helps us make it sink in a little bit more and makes you a little bit more conscious of those changes in speed. But otherwise, yeah, I feel like I'm reasonably confident to go ahead and do my Mod 2 now. I'm not quite sure when. I'd like to get it done in September. It sounded like they were mostly booked up for September though, and unfortunately at work, once again, we have redundancies hanging over our heads. So before I commit to spending a lot of money on this, I do want to have at least an idea of whether I'm still going to be keeping my job next month. So yeah, it's a bit shit. I'm not going to lie. So I really want to get my Mod 2 done and get those L plates off Luna, and hopefully be able to buy a bigger bike next year. But it does all ultimately hinge on still having a job at the end of the day. So I guess we'll just see how it goes. Anyway, on that slightly downer note, I guess, thank you for watching. I'd love to hear your comments. Feel free to criticise my riding and tell me everywhere what I went wrong that wasn't picked up by the instructor or myself. It's all good to know. And yeah, until next time, please like and subscribe and ride safe.